And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another fantastic installment from very, very high above all the puerile and insipid forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Wednesday. That's right, my friends. I, of course, am the enemy of a sworn enemy of all redcoats and those who want to abuse their power. And that's where we're going to start this morning on the program, both on the on the federal level and on the state level. You see, the problem with leftist politicians is what they can't get done legislatively, they attempt to do through brute force. And it happens in Washington, D.C., and it most certainly happens in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And here's the reason why I'm going to start here, because, big stories, you have to kind of promo them out. We work off of social media, so a lot of times you have to get people's attention. Make sure that you're going to listen to what's happening. And so to that end, on Saturday's edition of the podcast, I'm going to drop a major political story in the state of Wyoming. I've been saving this one for a while, for the right time, and it just so happens through a series of unexpected events that I think that now's the right time to do it. And it's a biggie, my friends. So you don't want to miss Saturday's installment of Cowboy State Politics, the podcast. It's going to be fun. I have some exclusive audio of some people that probably should have kept their mouth shut. And we're not just talking about some low-level staffer somewhere. Nope. And the truth is, in the Wyoming legislature, there really are no staffers, but, sometimes, members of the state legislature, they employ people privately to help them out. There's a few people that have folks like that, but we're not talking about one of those folks. We're not talking about anybody that happens to work in the Capitol. We're talking about those dirty elected officials themselves. So on Saturday's edition of the show, I'm going to drop a biggie. You don't want to miss it. We begin this morning at the federal level, and this is one that I've been waiting for a really long time. Since the Barack Obama administration, we have had to put up with this bull crap about green energy. And first of all, there is nothing green about green energy. And the best way to explain that is to direct your attention to windmills. Now, when you're driving down I-25 or when you get, I-25, and you get through Casper and down to Cheyenne, you see windmills all over the place. And yeah, it's true, they do produce a little bit of energy, but the truth is that they will never pay for themselves in the electricity that they produce, and the amount of petroleum products that go into building them first and then keeping them operating second is a huge amount. In fact, if you go out and walk around the base of any one of those windmills that's been there for a long time, in most cases, it looks like you've been changing your oil down there for a really long time. And what is happening is those giant motors on top of the windmill, well, you have to grease them. I don't care if it's being turned by the wind or whatever, you still have to have lubrication, and the lubrication is oil and grease, and so it just drips down. And it's and the amount of concrete that it takes to support one of those giant windmills, I mean, it's a huge amount. So first, it is an absolute fallacy that any of this stuff is green. That's just the messaging that they use to get you to go along with it. Well, according to the Washington Free Beacon, Trump's energy secretary has been hinting around that he's going to cancel billions of dollars in Biden's green energy loans. And the truth is, it's not just Biden. It goes all the way back to the Barack Obama administration, and probably before. I'm sure that there were all sorts of government subsidies that were given out to companies that were producing solar panels or wind turbines or whatever far before Barack Obama. We just didn't see it to the level of that administration until it actually happened. And of course, don't forget, like the biggest scandal of the time, and maybe you remember this, maybe you don't, but it was a $535 million loan to Solyndra, who, the loan was given out, and then almost immediately that company went bankrupt. Gee, what do you think happened to all of that money? Do you think that they lost it in producing solar panels like they told all of us they were going to do, like Barack Obama told all of us that they were going to do? Do you suppose that that's what happened? Or do you think that all of that money ended up in the pockets of the people that perpetrated the scam in the very beginning? Because all green energy is one gigantic big scam, and it has to be. Because there's no way that it's going to fulfill the promises that are fed to you and shoved down your throat. For example, right now, if all of us were to sell our gas-powered vehicles, which I would never do, by the way, interesting story. Here, I'll get to this in just a second. But and all of us were to drive electric vehicles, there isn't enough power available in our power grid to keep those vehicles on the road. A couple of years ago, it was Elon Musk himself that said that even the Teslas that are on order right now, if they were to be put into production, there isn't enough power to supply them. That we just do not have the infrastructure necessary to support all of those vehicles. And they don't really work anyway. So, and here's why I know that, or here's my version of it. So the lovely Christine's car is in the auto body shop, finally getting a repair from all of the hail damage from, last, wherever it was, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, whenever. And so the vehicle that we got from the rental company is this kind of a cool Jeep. It's a Jeep Wrangler, but it's a hybrid. And I've heard lots of stuff about, from different people owning hybrids and saying how efficient they are. So I was kind of excited to try one. And when the battery on that thing is fully charged, that is 100%, you cannot drive from here to Bighorn on one charge. Now, from here to Bighorn, we're talking like, 10 or 12 miles, maybe. But a full charge on that vehicle will not get you there and back. It switches over to gas, which maybe that's the point of the hybrid engine. But I'm just telling you, most of the time we've had that vehicle, we've been driving it on gas. So don't try to convince me that any of these electric vehicles, that hybrids, whatever, are worth the time and the money that you're going to put into them. And financially, they haven't been worth it to the American taxpayer. So from the Washington Free Beacon, and I quote, Energy Secretary Chris Wright hinted that he would soon take action canceling billions of dollars worth of Biden-era green energy loans. And he said, do not promote the American energy security and are too risky for taxpayers. In an exclusive interview with the Free Beacon, Wright took aim at how the Department of Energy's Loan Programs Office dished out billions of dollars in loans during its final months of the Biden administration. So Biden is getting ready to head out of town, or at least out of the White House, and they are quickly shoveling as much money out the door as humanly possible, because they know that none of those loans are happening after January 20th at noon. Not going to happen. And so what was going on in the days leading up to the inauguration is Biden's little minions. They were, well, I don't know if Biden's the minion or not, because he clearly wasn't running the presidency. But anyway, so all of Biden's people, they're shoveling truckloads of cash out the door. And a lot of these loans are from the Department of Energy. Now, when asked how he's going to approach the pending loans, Wright emphasized that the Department of Energy's core mission is affordable, reliable, and secure energy. Quote, so if you've got a project that relates to those things, if you've got equity capital and math that shows your project is going to work and you're putting your own money in front of it, we can come behind you and provide a little bit of debt capital so that we can make things happen faster. Those are the kinds of deals we'll do. We are not going to lend billions of dollars to companies with no money in the technology. Who knows if it's going to work? And even if it did work, it wouldn't add a lot of energy to the United States, he told the Free Beacon. Quote, when we lend, our focus is the American people. If this loan is going to make life for the American people better, then we're all in favor of it. If this loan is going to give some businessman a chance at the Holy Grail, we're not going to lend him money in that case. And the last situation that he's talking about are the circumstances that led up to Solyndra. And that's I use that because it's the classic example. It was the first loan that was given out through Obama's version of the, I think it was called the Reinvestment Act, Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009. That's what it was. The stimulus bill, as was commonly referred to it. None of those things actually panned out, and really it was just giving a bunch of favors to Obama's political allies. That's all that it turned out to be. So Wright's comments, which come as his agency continues a broad review of the loan program's office's activities, reflect many of the same concerns expressed by critics who say the Biden administration weaponized its lending authority to fund risky green energy projects like solar panel assembly plants, electric vehicle battery manufacturing, and hydrogen-powered facilities. Overall, the Biden Department of Energy closed on 25 loans worth, listen to this, $60.6 billion and issued conditional commitments for an additional 27 projects worth $46.9 billion, according to the Free Beacon's analysis of all of these filings. More than 80% of these loan closures and loan commitments came after President Donald Trump defeated former President Kamala Harris in November. And so, okay, so let me just put that into perspective. So we're talking about, let's see here, $106 billion. So $1/10 of $1 trillion in loans. And let me just put this into perspective for you, because I think that a lot of times we throw around these numbers and we don't really have any frame of reference. So, how much is, say, a stack of $100 bills. So 100 $1 bills, if you stacked them up and, just measured them, it's a little bit less than a half inch, so 0.43 inches. The height of a stack of 1,000 $1 bills, so 10 times the amount, is 4.3 inches. So about like that. Now, the height of a stack of 1 million $1 bills, and here is the magnitude of the dollar amounts that we are talking about. So a stack of 1 million $1 bills measures 4,300 inches or 358 feet, the height of a 30 to 35 story building. Think about that. So $1 million is the height of a 30 to 35 story building. Here's where it gets a little bit even more ridiculous. The height of a stack of $100 million worth of $1 bills measures 35,851 feet or 6.79 miles. Okay, so this would reach from the Earth's surface to the approximate altitude at which jetliners fly. So, 30,000 feet. So that is a huge sum of money. Okay, now here is the capstone on all of this. The height of a stack of 1 billion $1 bills measures 358,510 feet or 67.9 miles. This would reach from the Earth's surface to the lower portion of the troposphere, one of the major outer layers of our atmosphere. And if we get to the amount of the loans that were given out by the Biden administration at around $100 billion of $1 bills, it measures 6,786 miles. A column of bills this high would extend 28 times higher than the orbiting International Space Station. So we are talking about insane numbers here, numbers that you and I probably don't even understand. It gets to a point where you start talking about numbers in the millions or the tens of millions or hundreds of millions. Pretty soon, they don't seem like they're that big, right? So if you're talking in terms of $100 million, okay, you mentioned $1 billion, yeah, that seems like a little bit. But and you put that in perspective and say, well, it's only $1 million. Well, then that doesn't seem like it's that big. And I have this conversation with legislators a lot of the time, specifically new legislators, because, for people like you and me, $100,000 is a crap load of money. But that's not even a drop in the bucket when you consider how much money the state of Wyoming's legislature spends. And so you're talking about their budget for, the last time they actually passed a budget was almost $1 billion, $1.5 billion more than they spent the year before. So I think we're talking like $9 or $10 billion. So $100,000. Not that big of a deal. So we are at $100 billion. The amount of loans that were given out by the Biden administration in the final days, right before Trump was inaugurated, was a gigantic amount of money. So other loans issued in the final weeks of the previous administration include $9.6 billion to Ford's electric vehicle battery manufacturing plant. I don't know why Ford needs a loan from the federal government. $7.5 billion to Stellantis's electric vehicle battery project, $6.6 billion for electric vehicle maker Rivian's manufacturing plant, $1.7 billion for sustainable aviation fuel plant, $1.5 billion to a South Korean solar panel maker Q-Cell's assembly plant. So these are the type of projects that the Energy Department is going after, and they rightfully should. I've been waiting for this for a really long time, my friends, simply because I am so sick of giving money to people who are generally just putting it in their pockets, that their projects really have no hope of succeeding, and yet they're just shoveling our cash out the door. It happens in Washington, and it certainly happens right here in the great state of Wyoming. We'll come back in just a second. It's spring-ish in Wyoming. Well, what that means for the uninitiated is that it's going to be 70 degrees one day and then snow 1.5 feet the next. And really, if you don't like those two options, just wait a little bit. The weather will change. I know, it sounds a little stressful, but really you should put your mind at ease and buy a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They'll keep you warm and dry even on the nastiest, coldest spring-ish day, and they'll keep you cool and dry even when it's 75 and sunny. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Are you one of those people that said something like this before Trump became president?
I have a house in Spain that is going to be ready right after the election.
Siberia,
Nova Scotia.
I'm definitely moving to Canada.
Straight to hell. Iceland.
France.
Asia's pretty cool.
And has the past 5 weeks just been more than you could bear? If that's the case, you have come to the right place. All you need to do is call my friend Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market all across the state of Wyoming. Last year, she sold around $30 million worth of property. Everything from small residential properties all the way up to big giant ranches. So if you've got to get the heck out of Dodge, if you've got to be gone Johnson because you can't stand that Trump is the president, call Rebecca Bextel. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. Let me say that one more time for you in case you missed it. 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy State Politics is only going to continue to expand. This program is the most listened to conservative show in the great Cowboy State. You can listen to it on YouTube, Facebook, X, Twitter. Actually, you can watch it on all of those. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. My friends, if you are a baseball fan, yesterday was a big day. And the reason I said that, I mean, and it's interesting because, like, I'm not referring to anybody hitting a home run or a grand slam or anybody walking off a win. You know, all those things are super exciting, stolen bases, all of that stuff. But that's not what I'm referring to. For a very, very long time, there have been baseball players that are long dead, that are still banned from baseball. Perhaps the most famous is Pete Rose. He was banned from baseball in 1989 because he bet on the Cincinnati Reds. Now, he never bet against them. He bet on them to win. And, you know, that he was caught. And for that infraction, he was expelled out of baseball, banned from baseball for life. That was the sentence. And another famous one is Shoeless Joe Jackson. And, you know, have you ever watched the movie Field of Dreams? Well, Shoeless Joe is the character that walks out of the cornfield first, you know, build it and he will come, that sort of thing. Well, Shoeless Joe was part of the Chicago White Sox in the 1918 World Series, where 8 of them allegedly were accused of throwing the World Series. Now, there was no evidence whatsoever that Shoeless Joe, who, by the way, and just to talk about his baseball credentials for just a second, Shoeless Joe was one of the first, one of the only natural hitters in the game. A natural hitter is pretty much somebody who can hit anything. That doesn't matter what pitch it is, whether it's a knuckleball or it's a split finger fastball, they can hit it. Well, anyway, 1918 World Series, the 8 guys on the White Sox were accused of throwing the game, and they were kicked out of baseball, including Shoeless Joe Jackson. But again, there was no evidence whatsoever that he actually threw the game. Now, the other people did. So that happened. Now, there's another great movie that you can tell you about that story is the movie 8 Men Out. Great movie. Well, anyway, yesterday, the baseball commissioner, let's see here. What the heck is his name? They got a new commissioner, Manfred. He said that because these people are now dead, that the punishment that was meted out to them has served its usefulness, and there's no longer anything that they can they can do to the game, which I would argue that they didn't really do anything to the game anyway. You know, a lifetime ban, I think, was a little excessive. But let's hear from the Associated Press. Pete Rose and Shoeless Joe Jackson were reinstated by Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred on Tuesday, making both eligible for the Sports Hall of Fame after their careers were tarnished by sports gambling scandals. Rose's permanent ban was lifted 8 months after his death and came a day before the Cincinnati Reds will honor baseball's career hits leader with Pete Rose Night. Manfred announced Tuesday that he was changing the league's policy on permanent ineligibility, saying bans would expire after death. Several others will also have their status changed by the ruling, including all of the members, it was the 1919 Chicago Black Sox, former Philadelphia Phillies president William Cox, and former New York Giants outfielder Benny Kauf. Under the Hall of Fame's current rules, the earliest Rose or Jackson could be inducted would be 2028. Rose agreed to a permanent ban on August 23rd of 1989 following an investigation commissioned by Major League Baseball, and it concluded that Rose repeatedly bet on the Reds as a player and manager for the team from 1985 to 1987, a violation of a long-standing MLB rule. Now, it's important to point out that Pete Rose never bet against them. Okay, he always bet on his team to win, but that was enough to get a lifetime ban. So if you're a baseball fan, pretty cool that now Pete Rose and Shoeless Joe Jackson and several others can be inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. This has been a long time coming. You know, an interesting fact about Pete Rose, after he was banned from baseball, every autograph he would sign on the baseball, it would say, "I'm sorry I bet on baseball," and he'd sign it Pete Rose. So don't tell me that he wasn't sorry for what he did, and but again, you actions have repercussions, and you have to take responsibility for your actions. And Pete Rose definitely did. Shoeless Joe Jackson, that's been a long time coming. One of the game's only natural hitters. So anyway, awesome day if you're a baseball fan. So I've been prepping for this next segment for quite a while. And, you get a collection of sound bites, and certainly here at the Cowboy State Politics headquarters, I've got a collection of sound bites that's it's pretty immense. In fact, I need to go through it and organize a bunch of them. But I finally saw a piece in the Blaze that I think that could lead with this. And it's entitled, "Who Can Lead the Democrats Out of the Wilderness?" And I'm not saying that I want this to happen. However, a strong Democrat Party helps the Republican Party. That you have to have strong arguments in the marketplace of ideas. It's, iron, and I'm not saying anybody in the Democrat Party is quite this sharp, but, the theory is iron sharpens iron. And if you have a strong Democrat Party, you're going to have a strong Republican Party. But for quite a while, the Democrats have been wandering around without anybody to lead them to any sort of electoral success. And here's how the piece begins. On Tuesday, April 29th, Governor J.B. Pritzker called for a mass mobilization against President Donald Trump, marking 100 days of the 47th administration with a clarion call that, quote, "These Republicans cannot know a moment of peace." But nobody listened because nobody cares what J.B. Pritzker has to say. Except for maybe a single-looking white woman walking a dog who spit on U.S. Attorney Ed Martin during a Newsmax interview on Thursday. And she just walked by him and spit on them. But she's probably the only person that was listening to J.B. Pritzker. The faithful roared and stomped their feet so powerfully that you could feel it in the rumbling floor when J.B. Pritzker spoke. But did it amount to anything? No. There was no mass mobilization event. Here in the Cowboy State, there have been protests, seemingly like every other week for about a month on end. But they never produced any more than, here in Sheridan, any more than 60 or 65 people. But Democrats, and here's what the real problem is. The Democrats are confronting a terrible reality in 2025. That mass movement of the past 9 years that saw masked Democrats attacking old men and young women, vandalizing minivans at Trump rallies, blocking bridges and defunding police departments, they didn't lead that movement. It wasn't the Democrats in power that were telling these folks, hey, go vandalize this car or throw a firebomb at this building. It was the radicals leading the Democrats, which is a very different situation. When you have the folks that are destroying things, the thought leaders in the party, it doesn't make for a solid political argument. In fact, it takes your party down the road of ineptitude and obscurity, which is where the Democrats are right now. Now, politicians fancy themselves leaders. Almost all of them do. But virtually all of them are followers. And I said virtually because there are only a few people in politics who are actual leaders. Most people don't make waves, and they do their best to ride as many of them as possible. That's the reason that so many recently self-styled moderate Democrats are stained by the incredible excesses of the 8-year moral pandemic that dominated and animated their politics. They just followed along. They voted in lockstep because they're all Democrats, and if it happens to be a Democrat that's proposing an idea, well, then they should vote along with them. But what this has led to is a virtual lack of a backbench. And you've heard me talking about this for a long time. If you're a consistent listener to Cowboy State Politics Live, that the Democrats don't have anybody sitting on the backbench. In any sporting event, you got to have players to replace somebody if they get hurt. And typically, you want a backbench that's got some pretty good ball players on it. You don't want a bunch of no name, no talent jokes there, because once one of your star players gets hurt, you're done. Well, the Democrats are far beyond that. They don't really have anybody to, run for any office whatsoever. And the people that have emerged as, quote, leaders, and remember that most politicians consider themselves leaders, because of course they are, right? People voted for you, voted you into office, so obviously you can lead them. But, you have to stop and question why it is that you got elected. Were you elected because you were a leader? Well, most politicians aren't. Most people just vote in lockstep, and very few actually step out in front and lead. Or did they vote for you because you were the best of the worst choices that they had? Let me give you an example. Jasmine Crockett. Listen to this. Now, this is her strategy going forward for the Democrats. Check this out.
It is this fear that the people within the party, within the primary system, will have about voting for a woman, because every time we voted for a woman, we've lost so far. And I think that that's a natural fear because we just want to win. So there's a lot of people that are like, you know what? Like, let's go find the safest white boy we can find. I mean, I'm just saying.
Wow. That's where we're at. That is the depth of the political analysis coming from the current Democrat Party. You see, the Democrat Party used to have a lot of leaders. Think about Senator Barack Obama. He electrified America's youth with the promise of forgiveness for slavery and segregation. He invited environmentalists and illegal immigrants, university professors, college, I mean, you name it. There was a long list of people that were going to follow Barack Obama. And they were propped up by a reporter class that claimed that Michelle Obama was the new Jackie Onassis, and her husband was the embodiment of cool. He introduced America to Hamilton and hosted famous people at the White House. And it seemed at the time that they could do no wrong, that Barack Obama could say whatever he wanted, and then the folks would just cheer for him. For example, now this one was said behind closed doors, but remember this? This one was played over and over on conservative talk radio, and it should have made its way to every eardrum within the sound of every microphone, but it didn't. But listen to this. I'm sure you'll remember it.
Under my plan of a cap and trade system, electricity rates would necessarily skyrocket, even regardless of what I say about whether coal is good or bad. Because I'm capping greenhouse gases, coal-powered plants. Okay, all right.
So it doesn't matter. Now, he said that very early on in his presidency, or right before he was elected, and he still got elected anyway. So there was a feeling at the time that Barack Obama could do anything he wanted. He could push any policy. And then the masses would just follow along. And in many cases, they did. Let me give you another example here and this was a speech that was given in, I think it was given in Arlington, Virginia. But take a listen to this.
If you were successful, somebody along the line gave you some help. There was a great teacher somewhere in your life. Somebody helped to create this unbelievable American system that we have that allowed you to thrive. Somebody invested in roads and bridges. If you got a business, that you didn't build that. Somebody else made that happen.
So that was during his second campaign for president. And think about how aggressive and how offensive that is to every person that built their own business. For the president of the United States to stand up there and say, you didn't build that. Somebody else made that happen. And yet, Barack Obama got reelected. You see, that is when the Democrat Party had leaders. And even before then, the Democrat Party was able to at least articulate a message that would resonate with American voters. Think about this. Now, gone are the days of this one here. Let's see if I can find it. Here we go. Now, you remember, and you got to go back in your way back machine to remember this one. But this is from a time when the Democrats actually had people that could lead. They had a backbench. They had a number of people that were prominent, that could speak well, that were good on stage, and they actually won elections. I'm not saying that Democrats don't win elections, because they do all of the time. But when you're thinking about the 2026 presidential election, what's going to happen, or the 2028 presidential election, rather? Who do the Democrats have? They don't have anybody else that talks like this and can actually persuade people.
We know big government does not have all the answers. We know there's not a program for every problem. We know, and we have worked to give the American people a smaller, less bureaucratic government in Washington. And we have to give the American people one that lives within its means.
Now, most people don't remember that during Bill Clinton's second campaign, he had to move all the way to the middle in order to get elected. But he did. And in saying stuff like this, and I'll finish up the soundbite in just a second, because it's one that, this one for a Democrat to say, this one ought to be in my classic collection of Democrat sound bites to pull whenever necessary. But here's the end of it. Listen to this.
The era of big government is over.
What? Okay, so that's when, Bill Clinton balanced the budget. He was the last president to actually balance the budget, and he was a Democrat. So what my point is that the Democrats don't have anybody like that anymore. They don't have anybody that's that charismatic. Are you telling me that Cory Booker is going to be able to run for president, that he is going to be able to captivate the attention of the American voting public and actually get elected? No. They failed with Kamala Harris. They failed with Joe Biden. And that's it. Hillary Clinton, I don't know who else they've got that could, even attempt to run. But the Democrats have failed, and now they are wandering in the wilderness. So Obama, and in the end, Obama failed to live up to an impossible promise and left the country more divided, embittered, and racially charged than it had been for half a century. But he's the person that built that movement. Now, let us not forget that it was this one that came out during Obama's first campaign for president. We were told from the very beginning what was going to happen with that administration, and yet the vast majority of us didn't listen. So, I mean, this is what we were told from the very beginning. You shouldn't forget this one either. Let's see here. Here we go.
And Barack knows that we are going to have to make sacrifices. We are going to have to change our conversation. We're going to have to change our traditions, our history. We're going to have to move into a different place as a nation to provide the kind of future that we all want desperately for our children. And he is the man to do it.
And he is the man to do it. The man to change our history, our traditions, and we're going to have to move to a different place. And yet, people still voted for him. And it's absolutely incredible, my friends. But, right now, the Democrats don't have anybody like that. There is nobody that they have on their backbench that can lie so skillfully to the American people and still get a huge amount of votes. Now, they have Senator Bernie Sanders, and a couple of years ago, he was a leader too. Now, it's impossible to forget that he was what he was like on the campaign trail in 2016, that Bernie refused to be bogged down in the Ivy League politics of race and gender. He stood above them, campaigning on, the class envy. In fact, he said, let's see if I've got it here. Let's see here. It's call for no war but class war. The capitalists and the warmongers were the enemy. Chief among them was the former First Lady, Senator, and Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton. Now, Bernie Sanders was never going to win the election, but at least he was able to get a whole bunch of votes and win a whole bunch of primaries. He did this past election, too, and the Democrat establishment pushed him aside, of course, because, Bernie Sanders was not going to win. And then he left too. Now, 4 years later, Sanders is a little bit less effective than the sock puppet that he turned himself into. Mouthing critical race theory and mumbling about gender ideology, the man who almost took down Hillary Clinton was beaten by Joe Biden. And again, I ask you, where are the other so-called leaders in the Democrat Party? Well, they don't have any, except, of course, if you think J.B. Pritzker or perhaps Mayor Pete Buttigieg. Gavin Newsom, maybe he can convince people that he's the man. Certainly, he's been moving to the right. Will people believe it when he says things like this?
I know we're Doge, but better, and we've been Doge, but better for literally 6 years.
Literally 6 years.
You can go back. There's amazing. We still
it is amazing that you would say that. And yeah, we do have the tapes of all of the devastation that you brought to a formerly great state of California. But you see, the Democrats need a leader. They need someone who won't grovel before activists and who can rise to meet the moment. Despite their constant griping about Republican loyalty to Trump, they've failed to produce anyone untainted and willing to lead with conviction. I mean, it's hard to imagine a time when the Democrats actually could win an election. It's hard to imagine a time when they had anybody that could challenge the likes of Donald Trump. I mean, let's not forget. I mean, there were a lot of people that were running for president. I'm not saying they were going to win, but there was a lot of people that stepped forward. Where are those people? Who are those people that the Democrats could put forward? Now, when we come back, I'm going to give you some examples of the people who think that they are leaders in the Democrat Party. And honestly, they're just a former shadow of a formerly powerful party. They're becoming almost irrelevant as the Wyoming Democrat Party. But I'll give you some examples when we come back. But first, an outrageous profit timeout.
Here at U.S. Coin Capital, we hear from Americans across the United States who have a growing concern about the future purchasing power of U.S. paper money. Many Americans are looking for an alternative for long-term capital. For more than 35 years, the people at U.S. Coin Capital have educated American investors on how to properly accumulate United States gold and silver coins. Call us at 1-800-878-2646 or visit us on the web, uscoincapital.com.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics.
Some say standing up for what you believe in is being extreme. Ask any woman in Wyoming. They'll tell you this is called courage. The mainstream media claims that holding the line on important issues is being unreasonable. My mom taught me this is called staying true to our principles. In other places, people argue you always have to compromise to get something done. Here in Wyoming, we know that some things are worth protecting at all costs. Some say it's time we give up on the values that made our state great to accommodate toxic culture. I say it's time to stand tall and protect the values that have served Wyoming well for over 134 years. Join Honor Wyoming as we defend and preserve the Wyoming way of life. Find out how you can make a difference today.
Visit honorwyoming.org. Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live, Wyoming's most conservative voice. Documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live on a Wednesday. Now, before the break, I was discussing how the Democrats really are kind of wandering in the wilderness. And it's hold on just a second here. One of the things that I missed from the home studio is that I have studio dogs. That's right, my friends. I don't know if you remember that or not, but the puppies like to join me in the studio. So every once in a while, they knock on the door. So anyway, my friends, the studio dogs and I realize that the Democrats really don't have any sort of leader that's going to step forward. And of course, all politicians think that they are some sort of leader, even if they aren't. But a new class of Democrat has emerged. And I played you one of the sound bites from one of the Democratic hopefuls, Jasmine Crockett, saying, we're just going to look for the safest white boy we can find, and we're going to run him in the next election, and he will probably beat whomever. Yeah. Right. Well, there is another guy that just absolutely irritates the crap out of me, David Hogg. For a long time, he's been the anti-gun mouthpiece of the Democrat Party, even though that nobody has really paid any attention to him because he is that inflammatory, that he's the guy that'll stand up there on the stage and scream that we have to take away your guns. I mean, that's David Hogg. Well, the Democrats, not that long ago, elected him as their vice chairman. And because we know that the Democrats really don't give two craps about the Democrat process or the validity of votes from their members or any of that, really, they just invalidated that election. And they did so in kind of an unceremonious fashion. They just decided that David Hogg has become too much of a liability, and they got rid of him. And let me just give you an example of why they got rid of him. So just take a listen to this.
Right now, what I think happened last election is younger men, they would rather vote for somebody who, even if they don't completely agree with, they don't feel judged by, than somebody who they do agree with, that they feel like they have to walk on eggshells around constantly because they're going to be judged or ostracized or excommunicated. And what's interesting about this moment is it feels like the two parties in some senses have flipped, where, Republicans used to be the judgmental peoples in many ways. And since many Democrats, despite us, I would say for most of us coming from the right place of wanting to do the right thing, we've created a culture where we say, well, if you say the wrong thing, you're excommunicated. And that's just not how human beings work. Nobody is perfect, but ultimately what we have to do here is figure out how to bring people back in and work towards the bigger goal of advancing.
What he's saying right there is absolutely true. The Democrats have come to a place where it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what you say. If you say one thing that is out of line, then you are excommunicated from the party. Cancel culture, that was the Democrat weapon for a really long time. All you had to do is say one thing that was perhaps off color 10 years ago, they would bring it up and kick you out of the party. Now, to some degree, the Republicans played into this in many ways. I mean, there are a lot of conservative voices that used to be pretty prominent and are now kind of in obscurity because they said some things that were really out of place and we gave them the boot. But that was the time, right? Cancel culture. That's the way that you dealt with your political enemies. Well, that is the Democrat Party right now. That if you say one thing that's out of line or one thing that the leadership doesn't agree with, you're out of there. Now, David Hogg is absolutely right about this. But the problem is that you have a person in a position of power that does not understand the political necessity that the Democrats are faced with, and that is to find someone who is going to lead the Democrat Party. Now, remember I said, leaders are very, very few when it comes to politics. Most of the people that get elected, they would rather vote in line and not be the ones out on the front lines articulating the message because they are incapable of doing so. While they can certainly go door to door and talk to people individually, they're not the folks that can stand up and lead a movement, because most of the people that think that they can do that end up resorting to brute political force, which is why I'm going to show you what I'm going to show you on Saturday's edition of the podcast. Brute political force in the state of Wyoming, and it's just as disgusting as you can think of. Hey, if you're a politician out there and you're thinking and you're listening to today's program or watching it rather, you might want to wonder, hey, what does he have a recording of? Because I'm coming for you. And here's the reason why: because you deserve the truth. And that's something that the Democrat Party and, frankly, the Redcoats in the Republican Party have a really hard time with, is telling you, the voter, the truth, because they are inauthentic people. There are people that stand on your doorstep and they tell you things like, abortion is bad, I love my guns, taxes are too high, hey, I'm a conservative, you vote for me. And then when they get to wherever they're going, Cheyenne or Washington, D.C., they do exactly the opposite because they are fundamentally dishonest people. And I would argue that there are very, very few people in the Democrat Party who are honest. Most of them are dishonest. And secondly, what we've known for a really long time is that Democrats have a really loose and fluid relationship with the truth. Now, I'm not saying that the Republicans are immune to that. I'll give you several examples why the new chairman of the Republican Party has a loose relationship with the truth as well. I exposed one of those during my interview with him. So, I mean, either side is not immune to this. It's just that the Democrats don't have anybody to lead the party to the next level, to and through the next election. And here's why: because they just elected this guy who was on Bill Maher Bill Maher, Real Time with Bill Maher, I think it's called. And this is the stuff that he's saying. Now, listen, he's not wrong. But he's definitely wrong in the forum, and he's definitely being too honest with his audience. Listen to it.
Future of this country and helping young people especially get by so that they're able to focus on their lives and, getting with a young woman or something like that instead of how are they going to pay their rent, for example, or how are they working their 2 jobs. Young people should be able to focus on what young people should be focused on, which is how to get laid and how to go and have fun.
Listen to the applause. Ladies and gentlemen. Okay, perhaps that's too much honesty for the Democrat Party, but you can tell that David Hogg is not skilled in the political arena. He has made his bones being an activist, which during Barack Obama's time was a good thing. The only thing that Barack Obama ever did was being a community organizer. I mean, in essence, that is being an activist. But Barack Obama, and Bill Clinton, for that matter, possess something that David Hogg does not, and that is the ability to articulate a message to his audience, the ability, in a sense, to lie and make people believe it. Do you think that Bill Clinton actually believed that the era of big government is over? Absolutely not. He never believed that. But in order to move the party forward, for him to get reelected, he had to play the game. And that's exactly the problem that Democrats have, not to rely too heavily on my baseball metaphor, but they don't have anybody sitting in the wings able to play the game, able to definitely pick up the ball and run with it or throw it or whatever sports metaphor you want to use. They don't have a backbench. And that's why, my friends, they are absolutely wandering in the darkness in the wilderness and obscurity. And they don't really have anybody who is going to be able to do that. In essence, here is where the Democrat Party is. Now, this is during a congressional hearing. I didn't write down the person's name. It's kind of irrelevant. But what is not irrelevant is this is absolutely where the Democrat Party is right now. Take a listen to this.
And as an expert on women's rights in sports and in society, I want to be clear here. Transgender women do not pose a threat to women's sports. Transgender women belong in sports. And I'm here because I care about all women and girls in sport.
Yes.
And I know that bullying trans kids and creating panic about the existence of trans people will not make us safer. It won't solve any of the problems that I named about inequity in sports. And the fixation on harming trans kids, it will not fix the problems of the American people.
Yes. But what will fix the problems of the American people is completely lying to them and denying reality and denying biology. But my friends, that is where the Democrat Party is right now. That they have created an alternate reality that only they believe is the truth. And they can't fathom the possibility that nobody else agrees with them. They have lost the skill to navigate in the political arena and convince their audience that they have the better ideas. Now, I'm pretty sure that Bill Clinton and probably nobody in today's Democrat Party believes that type of garbage. But that's the stuff that's being peddled to the American people. And most people, like you and me, look at statements like that and we say that is absolutely unhinged from reality because, frankly, we don't believe in it. You can pick up any biology textbook and it disproves everything that was said on that soundbite. And you cannot convince people of what they see with their own eyes. The argument of don't believe your lying eyes doesn't work with the average voter. You can't tell people that things are better for them when their grocery price has tripled or their grocery bill has tripled in a couple of years. They just can't believe that. They're not going to believe that things are demonstrably better for them when they are paying higher taxes and when their dollar goes a lot less. It doesn't go as far as it did before. The problem here is that Democrats, and this is a lesson to Republicans, that most of the time Democrats are not telling you the truth unless they're really, really skilled. Now, I will argue that one of the reasons why conservatives have been able to gain so much ground in Wyoming is that they are telling Wyoming voters what they want to hear. They are speaking the truth. And it is difficult for liberals and redcoats to accept the fact that Wyoming citizens don't want to pay higher taxes. And so that's why the argument that was floated first time I heard it by Gail Simmons and a lot of her acolytes is that my taxes are just fine. We get a lot of services that we really don't pay for. Now, while I mean, there is an argument to be made there, I don't buy it. The reason that argument fell flat is it stands in direct contradiction to the lived experience of every Wyoming voter. You can't convince somebody of something that is completely the opposite in their real life. If they go about their daily life and what they're experiencing is the exact opposite of what you're telling them, that argument is not going to win. Now, at least the Democrats in Wyoming, being the small majority that they are, and let's not forget, it was not that long ago, 20, 25 years, the Democrats actually had a sizable majority in Wyoming. When I was younger, we had Democrat governors, Mike Sullivan, Dave Frudenthal. They were able to win elections. Why is it now that the Democrat Party is kind of wandering around in obscurity? Well, part of the reason is most of their voters switched over to the Republican Party and are now the people that I refer to as redcoats. Maybe they are rednecks too, but they're definitely the redcoats. And that's why we have a big division in the Republican Party. And there's another reason, and this is essentially the point that I was getting at, is that the Democrats are having difficulty winning elections because they are fundamentally dishonest with their voters. And the only way that you're going to be able to make any sort of political advances in an environment like this, where the conservatives have gained control of a large portion of Wyoming's government, and frankly, for that matter, in Washington, D.C., is that if you are either honest with your voters and are just advocating for more government and more spending and bigger programs, and you're not one of these fundamentalist wackos on the left, or you try to push everything through brute force, and that is just force your agenda upon anybody who's going to listen. And that, my friends, is what happened in the Wyoming Senate. And by the way, it's also part of what I'm going to expose on Saturday's edition of the podcast. And so, I mean, that's my diagnosis of the Democrat Party, and frankly, of one faction of the Republican Party that we're experiencing in Wyoming right now. And it's it's fascinating to hear what a lot of these people are saying, and they think that it is a persuasive argument when in reality it isn't. So again, I think a good piece of advice for any liberal politician in Wyoming, outside of Wyoming, is to reflect on this question. How is it that we went from somebody being able to say this? Let's see here. Where is it? Hold on just a second. Kamala Harris. Oh, here we go. So how is it that we went from a politician being able to say this?
We are 5 days away from fundamentally transforming the United States of America.
Listen to the thunderous crowd. How is it that a politician was able to say that and still get elected, and now your party is wandering in obscurity? What are the reasons that caused that change in the political future, the political reality of where you're at as a party? And it's not that American voters have changed. It's not that the populace has changed to a great degree at all. I think that the American public is pretty much the same as it has been in the last 40 to 50 years. That's not the part that's changed. The part that's changed is the players that you have and message that you're trying to put forward. I saw this funny meme the other day that Democrat presidents have to have a vice president who's dumber than they are. And so, Barack Obama had Joe Biden as vice president. Joe Biden had Kamala Harris and then Kamala Harris chose Tim Walz. And so, I mean, you get progressively dumber politicians coming out of the Democrat Party. And frankly, that's just because they're not really trying. They're sitting on their laurels and trying to use arguments that they've used repeatedly. And now, the Democrat Party is left with people like Gavin Newsom, who have destroyed California and are now trying their best to remake what they think that voters want to see. Well, what voters want to see is less government spending, less government control, more liberty. And so Democrats are realizing that maybe that's the message that they should go back to. But instead, you have people that are, and take, for example, this piece. here. Let's hear. House Democrats to introduce reparations push declare a moral obligation to send trillions of dollars to Black Americans. And I quote, Representative Summer Lee of Pennsylvania plans to introduce the Reparations Now resolution on Thursday. Do you really think that reparations for slavery is a message that American voters want to hear? That is going to be the winning message?
Horse crap.
Exactly. It's not going to win, and it's not going to work. Well, my friends, I burned up another busy broadcast hour on Cowboy State Politics Live. Make sure that you don't miss the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can find it anywhere that you get your podcasts. And don't miss tomorrow's edition of Cowboy State Politics Live. We'll be back in the new studio. I've enjoyed my time sitting here. And, again, I kind of enjoy the studio dog. So happy to be back. But tomorrow we'll be back in the main studio where we will continue our all-out assault on everything that's a redcoat. I'm David Iverson. See you tomorrow.